My best friend is so jealous, Marla told my daughter-in-law on the patio, holding her wine like a microphone. The word landed in the middle of my family like a match. In a week, group texts went quiet when I joined. Dinners moved to nights I couldn't make. Marla started hosting holidays to give me a break. And somehow I became the break everyone took. She trimmed me out of plans with a smile, then said my hurt proved her point. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't done. She thought she could steal my place with a story. But I was already gathering the kind of proof that doesn't need a story, and planning to take the one thing she couldn't replace once it was gone. Marla and I met in a church basement over folding chairs and lukewarm coffee. She was new in town, alone after a messy divorce and trying to keep 2 kids afloat on tips and grit. I brought her casseroles when her stove broke. I sewed hems on uniforms at midnight so her kids wouldn't get sent home. I watched those kids after school, fed them soup and made space for their backpacks in my hallway like they were my own. When her car died, I drove her to work at 5 a.m. for a month and slipped gas money into her coat. When she cried at my table because rent was late, I called my cousin with a basement apartment and vouched for her like I would for a sister. I shared my recipes, my church, my friends, and most of all my family. Sunday suppers, birthdays, the kind of laughter that makes you forget the clock. He had a knack for making things shine. Centerpieces out of nothing. Chalkboard menus in pretty letters. Photos that made paper plates look like a magazine spread. I cheered her on, bought her first party planner business cards and told people, Marla can fix it, when plans fell apart. When my son married and babies came, I folded Marla into the circle. Your family, I said, handing her a key because late deliveries and early starts do not care about locked doors. She took my arm in church like we were girls again and whispered, I'd be lost without you. I believed her. I did not count the rides or the favors. I kept no ledger by choice. I thought devotion pays you back in echoes. Not all at once, but steady. I did not think the echoes could be turned into a rumor with my name bent wrong. The first cut was a joke at my expense dressed like concern. Let's rotate who hosts, Marla said at Sunday lunch, eyes wide and sweet. So she, a chin flick at me, doesn't overdo it. My daughter-in-law nodded, grateful for help. I smiled and said yes. I brought the pie anyway. Next, she volunteered to streamline the family group chat. Too many notifications, she sighed, creating a new thread and naming herself admin with a sparkle emoji. Recipes I sent were met with thumbs up instead of plans. When I asked what time dinner was, she replied, we'll circle back, then posted photos later with captions that read just the right crowd. In the pictures, my chair sat empty, cropped like a stain. At church, Marla started retelling my stories as if she'd lived them. When we used to can peaches, she'd say, laughing at the memory I had made. People clapped her on the shoulder. You two are such a team, they'd tell me. She'd squeeze my hand under the table and whisper, you don't mind, right? I tell it better. She took over the gift pool for ease, collecting money on apps and announcing totals with a flourish. Cards started signing themselves from all of us. Once my granddaughter's school asked for a pie auction contribution. I baked 3. Marla printed tags with her business logo and tucked them beside mine. When the bids came in high, she bowed like she'd churned the butter. She started saying boundaries whenever I asked for clarity. We should protect the kids from mixed messages, she told my daughter-in-law. She means well, but she gets competitive. That word slipped into the room and sat down beside me. Competitive turned into jealous in a neighbor's kitchen, then landed on our patio like a verdict. At my son's birthday, Marla raised a glass. To growth, she said. To letting go of roles that no longer serve. People hummed like it was wisdom. Later, she slid into my seat while I refilled ice and posed for a photo with my grandkids. It showed up online with a caption about chosen family. I wasn't in the frame. She began scheduling events on days she knew I worked at the bakery. Oh, you can't, she'd text. We'll miss you. She'd post a picture 5 minutes later. My grandson's first 2-wheeler ride, my granddaughter's gap-toothed grin. You'll be there next time, she'd add, a ribbon tied around a bruise. I didn't argue in kitchens or comments. I washed my pie plates and stacked chairs. But I started listening for the click of the scissors under her smile. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it. It came at our church fundraiser, under string lights and polite music. Marla had designed the whole evening. Chalkboard signs, photo booth, gold stars on the donor wall. She worked the room like a mayor. Halfway through, the MC announced a surprise. "A special thanks to the woman who carried this event on her back," he said, calling Marla to the stage. She swept up the steps with a hand to her heart. "Not necessary," she called while taking the bouquet. Then she spoke. "I just want to say," she began, voice warm and steady, "that this night only works because we keep drama low and joy high. No competition. No need to be the center." Her eyes floated toward me and away, a touch so light you could miss it if you weren't the target. People clapped, looking at her, then at me, then back at her. It wasn't the words. It was the tiny, practiced pause she left, just long enough for a story to form in someone else's head. Afterward, she found me folding tablecloths. "Don't take it personal," she murmured, cheeks pink with praise. "You know how you get." "How do I get?" I asked, folding the last corner sharp. "Big," she said sweetly. "Everyone sees it." I put the tablecloth down like it was glass. I looked at the donor wall, at the gold stars under Marla, and at the ones that should have been under committee and volunteers. I thought about the envelopes we'd all stuffed, the flyers I'd hung, the soup I'd ladled until my back hummed. That night I made tea and opened a new notebook. On the first page I wrote dates, screenshots, receipts, minutes. On the second I wrote 3 names: Ruth, treasurer; Luis, printer; Tasha, school board. I drew a box around them. 10 minutes later I added 2 more: Pastor Evelyn, mediator; Mr. Chin, notary. He wanted a stage. Fine. I was done holding the curtain. I didn't plot in whispers or show up shouting at her door. I did what holds longer than noise. I gathered paper. Ruth keeps the books at church. We have folded bulletins together since the year my son lost his first tooth. Over coffee I asked, "Can I see the fundraiser ledger?" She slid it to me without commentary, because women like Ruth watch and wait. The numbers told a simple story. Donations in, expenses out, a planning fee line I'd never seen before. Small but there. I circled it, not because it proved theft. It didn't, but because patterns love to repeat when you let them. Luis runs the small print shop by the post office. He made the event posters. "Who paid?" I asked casual. "And which files did you print?" He pulled the invoice. 1 card. Her logo on the footer. He showed me the file names. 3 were mine. The recipe flyer, the donor thank you, the kids' corner signs, renamed with her initials in the file name. I took a photo. Names matter. Tasha sits on the school board and keeps her emails tidy. I asked about the pie auction. "Who gets credit?" He sent me the thank you list. Marla's business was listed as sponsor. I forwarded the receipt from my flower run and the photo of my handwritten tags. "Noted," Tasha replied and added, "Bring anything else." I exported my own texts and emails. The "We'll miss you" messages time-stamped against calendar invites sent while I was on shift. The DMs where she praised me in private, then used the same words a day later in public as her own. Dev, my grandson, showed me how to print them with headers and hash codes so no one could claim they were edited. "Metadata," he said, proud. I kissed his head. I called Pastor Evelyn and asked her to witness a conversation for clarity, not drama. I booked Mr. Chin for 2.5 hours to notarize affidavits if we needed them. I bought a plain manila folder and wrote 1 word on the tab: proof. I did not want to hurt her. I wanted to end the story she had started about me, and to take the one thing she couldn't replace if she lost it: her good name. The first brick moved with a pen stroke most people would ignore. The church board circulated a draft of new volunteer recognition guidelines before the spring gala. In the margins, I suggested 3 changes in small, neat print. 1. No personal business logos on volunteer materials. 2. Credit listed by team and task, not by individual unless voted by committee. 3. Any planning fee must be pre-approved and public. Ruth initialed each note. The chair wrote, "Sensible." It passed in a meeting where no one raised their voice. Marla did not attend, she was meeting a client. The minutes hold more power than applause. Next, I asked the PTA to host a gratitude wall at the spring fair. Let families post photos of helpers, I pitched. Real moments. No watermarks. The committee loved it. Luis printed a banner. Kids drew hearts. People taped up pictures from phones and junk drawers. Me pouring punch, Mrs. Hahn carrying folding chairs, Coach L fixing a net with zip ties. Marla tacked up a glossy of herself at a table with a centerpiece. It drooped beside the messy ones and told its own truth. At home I pulled out the knife she used most, the group chat. I started a parallel thread with my son and daughter-in-law only. No attacks. Short facts. I'm working Sundays this month. I can pick up kids Tuesday after 4. Here are the photos from the first day you asked me to take. The old thread still bloomed with her captions and their laughter. Mine grew quiet and sturdy. In 3 weeks, my son started answering in my lane first. We'll set dinner for 6 so Mom can make it. Let's double check with Mom, she has the kids Tuesday. You can build a habit by feeding it. I made an appointment with Tasha and brought a cloth bag of paper. We laid out receipts from the pie auction, the flower invoice, screenshots of the PTA thank you that listed a business as sponsor when the rules said, no businesses. Tasha made a note, amend policy language. We checked the donor list against Ruth's ledger. The numbers matched but the narrative didn't. Tasha's eyebrows twitched at the planning fee. We'll need to ask about that, she said measured. We drafted a simple motion for the next PTA meeting. All sponsor acknowledgements must reflect the origin of goods or services. Boring words. Bright light. Pastor Evelyn agreed to mediate a talk if needed but suggested something first. Host a maker's night, she said. People bring what they make. Tell the story of who taught them. It sounded soft. It wasn't. I booked the fellowship hall. We strung twine and clothespins and hung photos of work. Pies, quilts, posters, a chalkboard menu from last fall with my handwriting next to a picture of me chalking it while Marla held the ladder. People told truths without naming names. My grandmother taught me this. Ruth kept the books straight when no one looked. Mrs. M hemmed my sleeve and I didn't trip on stage. Marla arrived late, took a loop and left early, silent. The near miss came on a Tuesday when Louise texted, she's here asking for last year's poster files. I walked in by chance 2 minutes later with muffins. We met at the counter like women who share recipes. I'm throwing back photos for #TBT, she said, tapping her screen. Need the files I designed. Louise glanced at me. I pulled out my flash drive. I'll send my originals, I said pleasant. The ones from my phone with timestamps. She smiled too wide. Of course, she said and left with empty hands. 2 days later she posted a throwback anyway. The chalkboard menu appeared on her page with a caption. That time I did it all myself. 10 minutes in, Mrs. Hahn commented. I remember holding the ladder for you both. Good night. 20 likes. No reply. I didn't pile on. The quiet weight had already landed. The PTA brought up the sponsor language under new business. I kept my head down while others debated. It's not about calling anyone out, Tasha said. It's about thanking the right people the right way. It passed. Marla's face did not change, but her foot tapped. She raised her hand to propose professionalizing parent volunteerism with more branding consistency. No one seconded it. Ruth sent me the draft budget for the next church event. No planning fee line. A new line instead, volunteer meal vouchers. We would feed people who showed up to lift. I asked Mr. Chin to notarize 3 brief statements. From Louise about file names. From Ruth about the new policy. From Coach Al about who brought the oranges when the list fell apart. They weren't accusations. They were anchors. Then I made a little book. 15 pages, no flourish. Photos with dates. Screenshots with headers. Receipts with circles around what mattered. Captions in plain words. My photo taken on blank, posted on blank. PTA policy as of blank. Ledger entry blank explained by blank. I titled it What We Did Together. I printed 5 copies and slid them into manila envelopes. One went to the church board chair with a note, for transparency before the gala. One went to the PTA president, for record keeping as we update acknowledgements. One went to my son, so you don't have to guess. One went to Pastor Evelyn, in case the conversation needs a table. One I kept. On the morning of the spring gala, the night where applause wears a tux, the board chair called me. Thank you for the packet, she said. It clarified a few things. We're adjusting the program. Her voice was warm and careful, The way people sound when they have decided to do the right thing and want to do it kindly. That afternoon, my daughter-in-law knocked on my door. She had a copy of the book in her hands, pages thumbed, eyes rimmed red. "Why didn't you say something?" she asked. "Because saying is noise," I said. "This is proof." She nodded once and hugged me tight enough to make my ribs remember she was still my girl. At the gala, Marla wore a dress that moved like water and a smile like a stage light. The program had a page labeled "Thanks to our team" with names in tidy columns instead of a photo spread of one face. The MC spoke about quiet hands and shared work. When someone from the board tried to hand Marla a bouquet, the chair shook her head, smiled, and beckoned the whole committee. "All of them," she said into the mic. The bouquet split into small bunches. I took mine home and put it in a jar. Marla gave me a look that could cut fruit. Later she found me at the punch table. "You're making me look bad," she said under her breath. "No," I said steady. "I'm making the truth look like itself." That night I slept. Not because it was over. Because the pieces were where they needed to be for what had to come next. I wasn't going to take her money. I wasn't going to take her children's view of their mother. I was going to take the one thing she couldn't replace if she lost it, the good name she had threaded out of other people's work, and hand it back to the people it belonged to. Marla said I was jealous. So I took the one thing she could never get back once it was gone. Not her money. Not her job. Her name. It didn't happen in a shout. It happened the way truth does when you stop begging it to hurry and start giving it good shoes. 2 weeks after the gala, the church board posted the new recognition policy on the bulletin board and in the newsletter. Small font. Calm words. It read like a recipe. Ingredients, measures, heat low and steady. I watched people read it between coffee refills. No one gasped. They nodded the way folks nod when something that should always have been true gets written down. At the PTA meeting, the sponsor acknowledgement, change rolled through without a ripple. The secretary read the line, tapped her pen and moved on. When thanks were given for the spring fair, the chair held up a sheet that listed teams and tasks instead of names. She smiled at the room. "We did this together," she said. People clapped for themselves, which is the right way to clap. Marla kept smiling. She is gifted at it. But the smile didn't stick to the walls the way it used to. Slid. He tried to find new places to plant it. She offered to host a branding workshop for the moms in the church hall. "Let's elevate," she said. "Let's make our messages consistent." Pastor Evelyn thanked her and said, "We're elevating gratitude this season. Maybe in the fall." And then the fall came and what we elevated instead was the coat drive. A week later, a flyer went up at the community center. Founders Day Festival, Volunteer of the Year. The committee had decided to add an award to close out summer. I read the criteria twice. It was simple: show up, share credit, do the work. Nominations came from anyone. A panel would choose. The award would be a small plaque, a handshake, and a warm paragraph in the paper. Marla told 3 people she wasn't into awards. Then she told 3 more she hoped the community would finally recognize people who really move the needle. When she said needle, she made a small stitching motion like she owned thread. I didn't nominate myself. I didn't nominate Marla. I wrote 3 names on 3 forms in my small block letters: Ruth, Coach Al, and Mrs. Hahn. I attached photos I had taken of them doing the things they always do when no one is watching. I wrote 2 clean sentences about each. I didn't put my name in the notes. The photos already held it. The committee met on a Tuesday evening in the library's back room with the hum from the vending machine filling the quiet. I wasn't in the room. I didn't need to be. Tasha was. So was the church chair. So was the librarian who stamps my family archives envelope with care. They read the nominations. They looked at pictures. They circled a name. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Marla's. It was Ruth. The town wrote a small article for the paper. Ruth Delgado keeps the books and the balance. It had a picture of her with a stack of folded bulletins, a pencil behind her ear, and a smile that knows what numbers can save. The article named the ways she measures kindness. It did not mention centerpieces. It did not mention chalkboard fonts. It mentioned the year she found an error that would have cost the coat drive 3 empty racks. It mentioned the envelopes she licked in summer with the fan on low. It gave the right credit to the right person. Marla congratulated Ruth at Founders Day loud and warm. "No one deserves it more," she said into the microphone, hand on Ruth's arm like she had just discovered her. Ruth hugged her back like she hugs everyone. The room clapped. I clapped until my palms hummed. After the ceremony, the committee chair announced one more change that sounded small until it wasn't. We're forming a standing group, she said, to document our work. Photos, minutes, thank yous. A little history so we remember who we are. She scanned the crowd. We'll need a steward for that. Someone steady. Heads turned. Two voices said my name at the same time. Tasha and Mrs. Hahn. The chair nodded. If she'll do it. I did it. I took the file box labeled steward and felt how light it was and how heavy it could become. Marla's smile did not crack in public. In private, she tried to pry open small doors. She came to Luis's shop with a new set of posters and asked him to update our templates, tapping the old ones with her nail. He held up both versions. We're using the committee header now, he said. No personal logos. He didn't look at me when he said it because he didn't need backup. The rule lived on its own. She cornered the PTA chair and suggested a signature series for events, with her name discreetly on the back for quality assurance. The chair flipped to the new policy page and pointed to the line about businesses. We're good, she said. We're keeping it simple. She sent a late-night admin note to the family thread about keeping the chat focused. My son quietly moved birthday planning to the lane with only us three. He didn't tell her. He didn't need to. The first night I saw, 6 p.m. Sunday so mom can come after shift. I put my head down on my kitchen table and let myself cry for 1 minute and then no more. When a person builds her good name on borrowed bricks, the quiet removal of those bricks is louder than any speech. But there was one thing left. The lie she told about me, jealous, still hung in the air like smoke. You can clear smoke by opening windows. Or you can set a better fire. The school asked me to run the memory booth at the fall fair. A small table where people could drop a note about someone who had helped them this year. I brought a basket and index cards and a jar of pens that worked. Above the basket I hung one sentence on a piece of linen ribbon. Who made your day possible? Kids wrote teachers' names in bubble letters. Parents wrote coaches and crossing guards and neighbors who lent sugar. A few cards named me. I slid those into the pile with the same care as the rest. At the end of the night, the principal asked if I'd sort the notes for the announcements. I said I would. I made a list in my block print and I did one more thing. I put the cards in a simple grid, took a photo from above and printed it. The next morning I gave that list to the office and the photo to the librarian for the display case. Marla stopped by school to drop off flyers for a holiday-style workshop. She saw the grid. She looked for her name. She found it twice, small and honest, next to centerpieces and rides to practice. She saw mine as many times and then some. She stared at the board a long time like she was waiting for a caption to form. The librarian walked by and said, "Isn't it beautiful?" Marla smiled with her mouth and not her eyes. At church, Pastor Evelyn asked me and Marla to meet with her. We sat in the office with the lamp on and the plant that never dies in the corner. Pastor folded her hands. "I want clarity," she said. "Not a fight." She looked at me. "You've brought documentation." "Thank you." She looked at Marla. "You've brought gifts." "Thank you." Then she laid out 3 pages. Our new recognition policy, the PTA's sponsorship clause, a short covenant the church had drafted for volunteers, about truth and credit and blessing instead of branding. "I'm asking both of you to sign," she said, "so we can serve without making shadows." I signed. My name looked like it has always looked. Marla signed after a long wait that didn't fool anyone. "I'm not the villain," she said, half to the plant. "No," Pastor said, gentle. "You're a servant among servants." "That's better." You could feel something shift then. A door she kept behind her hips had been opened a crack. Light gets in there given time. But justice is not the door. Justice is the lock you put on the old one so no one drags it closed again. Founders Day had a small after-party at the community center. Cookies, lemonade, the kind of hugs that smell like perfume and powder. The paper's photographer stopped by to take a couple of shots for the Sunday edition. He raised his camera. People bunch up in front of a lens because skin knows where story lives. Marla moved toward the middle by habit. The chair put her hand on Marla's back and gently steered her 1 step to the side and 1 step back, clearing the center for Ruth and the volunteers in their aprons. It was a tiny correction, the kind you'd only notice if you were watching the map change in real time. I watched. I breathed. I held. 2 days later, the paper ran the photo, Ruth with the team who keeps the lights on. The names in the caption were in alphabetical order. Marla's was there between Mrs. Hahn and me. Alphabet knows how to be fair when people don't. She didn't post a glossy version on her page with the edges trimmed. She couldn't. She reposted the paper's link like everyone else and wrote, "Proud of our community," then left comments alone when the first 10 said Ruth deserved it, and all those quiet hands, and look, there's Mrs. M. She tried a second post that night, a throwback to her early days with a collage of pretty tables. Got a handful of hearts. People were busy loving the picture that held the whole team. Her bookings dipped. Not because anyone called for a boycott. Because the story people told each other over fences and car hoods had changed. "She does nice centerpieces," a neighbor would say. "But if you want the work done, ask the committee. Ask Mrs. M about the schedule. Ask Ruth when the check's clear. Ask Coach Al what time to set up." I know because someone said it to me in line at the post office. They didn't know I was in that story. I didn't tell them. I just mailed my letters and let the truth keep walking. She tried to start a new group for young moms who want more modern events. 3 came to the first meeting. 1 brought a toddler who cried. They left early. The second meeting 2 came. The third she canceled. "Too much on," she posted. In her place, the school calendar filled with our old kind of work. Coat drive sorting, box top trimming, a Saturday morning cleanup where half the town showed because someone wrote donuts on the flyer. We didn't need a brand. We needed brooms. My son invited me to dinner on a Thursday. No pretext, just lasagna and the kids arguing about new shoes. Halfway through, he put down his fork and said, "I saw the packet. I saw everything you didn't say for a year." He swallowed. "I'm sorry I let it go that long." The word sorry is small. It is also a key. It turned in the lock and I felt something heavy shift. I didn't grandstand. I touched his hand. "Thank you," I said. That was enough. Sophie called me the next day. Her voice was careful. "Will you help me with the teacher luncheon? I want to do it right." Doing it right turned out to mean lists, labels, and a map of the halls so no one walked in circles with heavy trays. We printed thank you cards that said "from all of us." We put no names on any banners. When it ended, the principal made a 5-second speech into a mic that squealed once. "Thanks to our parents," she said. "And to our steady hands." She looked at Ruth. She looked at me. She looked at the room. Everyone clapped themselves again. Marla came up to me in the hallway afterward carrying a stack of plates. "Do you need these washed or tossed?" she asked. "Washed," I said and took half. We stood at the sink in a silence that wasn't a fight. She rinsed. I dried. 2 women doing the small act that keeps a place alive. "I signed the covenant," she said finally, like a confession. "I know," I said. "I said some things," she tried. "You did," I said. "Aren't jealous," she whispered like the word tasted new. I think I was. There was. The mirror turned around. She saw herself. I didn't pat her arm. I didn't absolve her. I set a plate in the rack and said, "Then do different." She nodded once and reached for another plate. That would be enough for some. It was not yet the permanent act. A person can say a clean thing on a Tuesday and forget it by Friday. You need a peg to hang the memory on so it doesn't fall to the floor and crack. The peg was the Community Trust Charter. The committee drafted it in 4 sentences. It said, "We give credit in public to the people who did the work. We do not put our names on the backs of group efforts. We keep our receipts and our minutes clean. If we make a mistake, we correct it out loud." We printed it on a single sheet and put a pen beside it at every meeting table in town. Church, PTA, community center, block club. Not a legal thing. A promise. Sign once, mean it always. People signed. They signed with flour on their fingers. They signed with grass stains on their knees. They signed with ink that smudged and then dried. My son signed. Sophie signed. Coachell signed. The librarian stamped it with a small star. Ruth teared up, then laughed because she always does that at the same time. Luis hung a copy in his shop. Pastor framed one for the hallway. Marla came to the table last at the PTA and stood for a long time, pen in hand. She looked up at me. I held her eyes the way you hold a ladder. Steady, not pushing. She bent and wrote her name. You can't take back a name once you bind it to a promise everyone can see. In the weeks that followed, when she forgot and tried to slide a logo onto a flyer, someone pointed to the charter. When she went to tag herself first in a post about a team event, someone else posted the team photo with no tags and 50 hearts. When the church newsletter needed a paragraph about the kids program, Pastor emailed me for the blurb and then of her own choosing added a line. Thanks to Marla for the centerpieces, and to the crew who hauled chairs and mopped. It was fair. It was final. You might think taking someone's good name is about dragging it through the mud. It isn't. It's about washing the mud off the wall so the name reads as it is. In the end, Marla still had a name. It just didn't open doors it used to because the people on the other side now looked through the peephole first and saw the team behind her. Clients still hired her to make pretty. She's good at pretty. But when she tried to wrap our town in her ribbon, the ribbon slipped because the wall held firm. The announcements now say bake sale. Volunteers needed and not Marla's bake bash. The flyers say thank you, committee, and not by Marla. The paper runs stories about Ruth and Coach and Mrs. Hahn and a half dozen others whose hands were always there and never in the photo. The family thread says dinner at 6 and not admin has decided. That is what a stripped name feels like. Ordinary where it once tried to be everything. The night before Thanksgiving, my granddaughter climbed into my lap with a photo book she had made at school. On the first page she had glued a picture of me tying her shoe. Underneath she had written in pencil, "My grandma helps and says it's not about her, but sometimes it is about her because she helps." I kissed the top of her head and held the book like a miracle. That sentence was my award. I didn't need a plaque. Marla posted a picture the next day of her pies cooling on a rack. The caption read, "Grateful for friends who taught me to bake and for a town that does the work together." 10 people liked it. 2 commented with heart emojis. It wasn't viral. It was normal. And normal is the end of a reign. Weeks later, after we had bagged the last coat and stacked the last chair and I had typed the last line in the minutes and filed it in the steward box, Marla came up beside me with a trash bag and a quiet face. "Do you need me to take this out?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Thank you." She walked the bag out into the cold night and came back with her hands empty. She washed them at the sink and dried them on a towel. She didn't look for a camera. She didn't look for a stage. She looked at me. "I'm going to be better," she said. "Not a promise. A plan." "Good," I said. "So am I." She called me jealous and for a while the room believed her. I did not drag her. I did not become a villain to cut a villain down. I took the only thing that holds people up in small towns and large ones. The trust of others. I took it back from where she'd parked it under her own name and handed it to the people whose hands were already tired from holding everything else. In the mirror she had used to angle the light, I left a note in my small block letters. All of us. He could read it or not. The town already had. That was the last picture, the one I keep in my head when the house is quiet. A table, a stack of plates, water running low, 2 women side by side without a camera, doing the thing that outlasts every caption. She took my place with a story. I took her name with the truth. And there are some losses you can't replace once a community learns how to see. On quiet afternoons, I unlock the cabinet at the library and slide the steward box onto the table. It isn't heavy. Inside are minutes with coffee rings, thank you lists with smudged ink, a few photos printed on cheap paper that still somehow hold the whole day. I sort, label, tuck, and close the lid. The lock clicks soft. It sounds like a house settling. I think about the first time I met Marla. The casserole in my hands, her kids in shoes a half size too small, the way she held the key I gave her like it was warm. Back then, everything we did ran on trust. I lent her my name when hers shook. She leaned on my house when hers was thin. I didn't write any of it down because I believed good things don't need paper to last. I was wrong about that part. Good things do last. But paper helps when people forget. The rumor she started, jealous, was quick and light like a scarf tossed on a chair. It looked harmless until it covered everything. I spent a year folding chairs, tying aprons, and swallowing hurt so the room would stay friendly. I told myself that generosity would speak for me. It didn't. Not loud enough. Not to the people who only read captions. So I gave the truth better shoes. I put it on the wall and in the minutes. I set it in policies with short sentences. I handed it to the town and asked them to carry it, all of us together, so no one's version could crush it again. I didn't take her stage. I took away the trapdoor she'd hidden under other people's work and called hers. Now when the paper runs a photo, the caption lists a team. When the PTA thanks volunteers, they thank the whole group. When the church needs a blurb, it names the hands, not the logo. The charter sits by the pens like salt at the table. We don't make a show of it. We just pass it around so every dish tastes right. I don't walk around town looking for my face. I look for balance. I see it in small places. A child taping a thank you on the glass case. Ruth scratching a number then nodding. Coach L stacking cones without waiting for applause. I see it in my son who reads my lane before he answers. I see it in my granddaughter's pencil line under a photo book caption. She helps. That line is worth more than any speech. People ask me sometimes if I miss her. I don't miss the version who needed my table. I still set an extra fork. I still keep a clean apron by the back door. Forgiveness is a door you keep oiled even if you aren't sure who will come through. But I do not invite noise back into my kitchen. Peace is not fragile in this house anymore, and I have learned how to guard it without being cruel. Marla shows up differently now. She carries chairs. She washes plates. She signs the charter every time her name passes it, not because ink fades, but because habit makes a person real. We don't talk about the year of cutting and cropping. There's nothing left to pull from that thread that would make a new garment. Once at the sink she said, "I was wrong." I said, "Good. Be better." We dried the same plate. We stacked it where it belonged. Sometimes every day is the only apology that holds. I didn't take her money. I didn't take her place in her children's eyes. I didn't take the tiny joys she's actually good at. A ribbon tied clean, a table that catches light. I took the shine she'd poured over other people's work and handed the light back to the work. A name built on borrowed bricks cannot stand when you return the bricks to their homes. The old me would have wanted a grand moment. A microphone, a neat line that made people gasp. The woman I am now prefers the sound of the steward box closing, the shuffle of a sign-up sheet, the low hum of a room fixing itself. I like that our town learned a new reflex. When someone tries to take the middle, we make a circle. When someone says I, we add with. When someone is missing from a frame, we don't crop. We step back until everyone fits. Family has changed too, not all at once, but true enough. The group chat bleeps less. Dinners land on nights I can make. My son looks me in the eye. My daughter-in-law hands me the shopping list without a speech. The grandkids climb into my lap and ask me what I'm labeling now. At birthdays, photos happen with me holding cake and someone else holding the camera. No one has to say, "Make sure you get everyone." The lens already knows. Sometimes at night I sit on my porch and think about that first casserole, about the rides at dawn, about the hems I ironed at midnight so 2 kids wouldn't get sent home. None of that was wasted. Nothing given in love disappears because someone told a story. Love leaves fingerprints that even the sharpest scissors can't cut clean. And what about me? I used to believe that keeping the peace meant making myself small. Now I know peace doesn't need me to shrink. It needs me to stand. To write the minutes. To keep receipts. To say names. To stamp the page. To hold the door. To teach the children that fairness has paperwork and that hearts can be kind and exact at the same time. Marla called me jealous. Maybe I was once of how easily a pretty story can win a quiet room. I'm not anymore. I've seen what lasts. It isn't the spotlight. It's the ledger balance to the penny. It's the right names under the right work. It's a wall of thank yous with different handwritings. It's a town that learned to trust slow. I won't pretend I didn't want her to say it out loud where everyone could hear. But I don't need that to sleep. I have better evidence. A signed charter. A program that thanks a team. A child's note that says you made my day possible. A son who comes early to set tables. A kitchen that smells like cinnamon and not like fear. If she ever forgets, the paper will remind her. The minutes will. The next person who tries the same trick won't get far, not because I am fierce, but because we are ready. We wrote down what fairness looks like. We framed it. We put it beside the pens. I keep the steward key on a ribbon in my drawer. It is small and plain. When I lock the box after another long day, I think about the thing I took and why it matters. I didn't steal it. I rescued it. I took the good name she'd borrowed and set it back on the shelf where it belongs. Under all of us. That's the picture I keep. Not a glossy of me in the middle. A room where everyone shows. A caption that doesn't lie. She turned my family against me with a story. I changed the story into a record. And records once kept don't scare. They stand.